We are live. Welcome back to Have a Dadbod podcast, episode number 2. We're going to talk about anger. I've been getting a lot of DMs about anger. Chris, I need you to talk about anger. So I'm going to give it to you. What do I know about anger? Some would say I'm an expert. My ex-wife would say I'm an expert. I would say I'm an expert. And I'm not an expert like I went to Harvard and I received a master's degree about psychology or whatever that big word is. I am an expert, meaning I've dealt with anger my whole life. I've learned the good ways to deal with anger. I've learned the bad ways to deal with anger. And so we're going to break into it. Episode numero dos. Anger. As you listen to this, it is 2020. We're in November, after the election. I came up with this topic about anger prior to one of the most controversial elections ever to happen in the United States. I promise you I'm not going to talk about the election on this podcast. However, I planned talking about anger a couple weeks ago and actually finally got around to recording it. So want to talk about anger, a couple different things. Where did you learn anger? What are ways to heal anger? And then what are you actually supposed to do with anger? So want to first start out with what I've learned the hard way about anger. I always like to kind of preach from my own pulpit, aka my own life experience first, before I try and get in and pretend like I'm an expert in something else. So my experience with anger, grew up, my dad was on steroids and definitely showed anger growing up. I learned anger. I was a really angry kid for the most part. My little brother, shout out to my little brother if you're listening to this, he called me the devil. And that's not because I was a saint and I treated him well, because I was an angry dick. I was an angry kid. And I had a lot to be angry about. However, what I really didn't realize until a later point in my life was I just had a lot of emotions and feelings stuck inside. Anger was the way it showed itself. It reared its ugly head, if you will. So I learned anger from my dad, I would say. And Dad, if you're listening to this, thank you for teaching me this. I wish I would have learned some other lessons as well with anger, but a couple years ago, I had the most severe anger episode, if you will, I've ever experienced in my life. I was full of absolute rage. And so a couple things with anger. What I learned, I actually voluntarily went to anger management. So the voice that you are hearing, my name is Chris Zach. I'm an anger management graduate, 12-week course. If you guys want and I get enough DMs, I will post my certificate, which I gladly still have. However, anger is a secondary emotion. It's a secondary emotion. What does that mean? We feel something before we go through and experience anger. For myself, it was a lot of hurt. It was a lot of shame. It was a lot of fear. And so what I did was I masked itself and I let anger kind of have the final say. Now, anger is not a bad thing. That's the other thing. Anger is not a bad thing. What you do with anger potentially can be, right? If you're angry and you get wasted, you drink, you drive, you hit your kids, you hit your wife. There's all of these other things and actions that can happen out of anger, but it's not the emotion, if you will, of anger that actually is responsible. So anger is a secondary emotion. For myself, it was a lot of hurt. Hurt was really what kept revealing itself and coming up to the surface. Then you've got to know what to do with anger. So let's take a look at that. Anger. Physiological. I think that's the right word. If not, some scientist or someone smarter than me, send me a message. Physiologically, in your body, there are things that happen when you get angry. So when I was in anger management, one of the first things they did with everyone in the room is we went around the room and we talked about what anger looks like for us. And for myself, I said, I clench my teeth. I start talking like this. I start swearing, the F word in particular. Yeah, if you ever hear me say the F word, hopefully it's either in comedy or I'm really angry. The other thing, my heart rate. I can feel it in my chest. I can literally feel anger in my chest. And so I had to start paying attention to these. So a couple weeks in, they said, okay, pay attention to those physiological changes in your body when you're angry. And then what you should do. So what are the ways to heal anger? What do you do with anger once you start feeling it? You got to get to the root of it, right? Sometimes you need to address it immediately. So that's maybe you're angry because a situation just happened. So right now, for the last 2.5 years, and I'm getting personal here, but I think this is important. I've been dealing with a custody battle over my kids. That makes me angry. Is that justified anger? Should I be angry about my kids? Absolutely. I think that's justified anger, right? I think that's righteous anger. However, what I do with that anger is a whole other thing. So one of the best lessons I learned, and I want to pass this on, and this is pretty much this, what I'm about to share with you is the whole reason why I wanted to do this podcast. And that is the word power. Power. Think about anger, you think about power. Anger has incredible power. If you don't believe me, hang out with someone who has a bad temper. Do they have power to alter and change a room, or a household, or a day, or a marriage, or a relationship, or a football game? Think about it. In addition to that, when you experience anger through someone else, it has incredible power to impact you. Your thoughts, your feelings, you start to act out of fear. You start to have anxiety. So what I did with my power is I gave up my superpower. I was a people pleaser. Hey, never share anything, keep everything inside, bottle it up, suppress it, never talk about it. Right? I'm sure a lot of you listening can relate to that. So here's the cool thing with anger for myself. I was giving that power to other people. Now, here's the interesting thing about that. I can take that power back. So what I mean about giving away power and power within anger is I would get upset at someone and then I would start to take that anger out on other people. I would take that power and that hurt or whatever they were carrying, and now I took it in, right? So it's like I was contaminated. Right? Anger can be toxic, right? You're drinking poison. And so for myself, I stopped giving people power. What did that mean? I started to have to establish boundaries. I had to pay attention to relationships that were making me angry. And at the time, it was my marriage. I was angry because things were being said to me that were really, really hurtful, and I wasn't okay with it. That was my body, if you will, was responding to that hurt. And so it was righteous anger. What I did with it is I hurt back. I definitely was not a saint. However, what I did eventually learn, and I'm still learning actively, and I have to practice every single damn day, is you have to manage that. You have to manage that energy. You can either give it energy, you can pay attention to it, you can talk about it. So right now, maybe it's something bad happened. Oh my God, I can't believe I was at the freaking grocery store. This jerk off in front of me, guess what he did? Right? And you tell 10 people. You impacted those 10 people. You took that energy and you handed it off to people. So think about that. What do you do with your anger? And for myself, what I had to start doing is I had to start really, really focusing on healing. For myself, I had to heal. I know that's not the most exciting thing to talk about, but anger has such potential to just really, really shift your day. But I was taking anger and I was giving it to someone else, and I was saying, hey, you know what? You tell me what kind of a day I'm going to have. You want me to have a crappy day because you're angry, you're upset about someone, the stoplight, whatever's going on in your personal life? Sure, go ahead. I'll take that on. I had to stop doing that. So that was something for myself. I had to stop letting anger come into my life. And you'll know. After listening to this, I hope the next time that you hear anger or you see anger, you're able to identify that as what anger looks like. That's a huge step, though. And so, what do you do when you're angry? That is $1 million question. For myself, I had to take 5. That was my biggest thing. For myself, I consider myself to be a pretty self-aware individual. So for myself, I had to step back and remove myself from the situation. And then I kind of talked to myself through it. Okay, what are you pissed about? Oh, I'm pissed that this comment was said. Okay, why are you pissed at it? Oh, because it hurt my feelings. Okay, is that comment or that statement, is it true? No, it's not true. Okay, well then just take it as that. It was something that was said to you that was stupid. Move on with your life. Is it going to matter in 5 years from now? No? Okay, probably is not important. Is it going to matter in 5 minutes from now or 5 days from now or 5 weeks from now? And so if you notice kind of how I'm talking about this, I'm kind of talking down to anger a little bit. And I'm kind of putting it in check a little bit. Being like, hey, anger, you're not bigger than this situation or my ability to kind of go through it. So for me, I had to take a couple minutes out. So for myself, one thing I do is when I'm pissed off, you're on social media, you're on Facebook, you read a comment and it pisses you off. Best thing that you can do, take 20 minutes. Actually, take 30 if you can handle it. There is a psychological effect that anger also has. Increased heart rate. All the dopamine gets fired off in your brain. You start, making more kind of emotional decisions. It affects your decision making. So it takes about 27 minutes for anger to kind of leave your body, if you will. So I always think about, if you go if you go on a run, right, you get home and your heart rate's still, it's still pumping a little bit. It takes a couple minutes to kind of come down. Same thing with anger. 27 minutes. That's the scientific number. However, for myself, I need about 5-10 minutes usually, and I can kind of come back in. But sometimes that anger, it might be something bigger than that. So, for myself, that's a big one. Another thing is invest that energy elsewhere. So for myself, if you come over to my house here in San Diego, California, you're going to find Bath and Body Works product. You're going to find I do gardening. I have a lemon tree in my backyard. I have a bunch of plants and flowers. I have a bunch of succulents. I have hummingbird feeders. I started doing stuff like that to kind of help myself, kind of come down from it. I'm a musician. I love playing guitar. You put a guitar in my hand, that's anger management right there. Give me 5 minutes with the 6-string, I'm good. Laughing. I love laughing. So a lot of times when I'm pissed off, I'll throw on some stand-up comedy. Go on YouTube. Watch videos. You want to Google dad jokes. Do something with that anger. And so for myself, that's something that's been really, really big. The other thing, and this is kind of what I want to wrap up with about anger, is we need to get back to the foundation of communication, which is that personal communication, right? Face to face or hearing a voice. A lot of our communication these days is via text message or behind our screen, right? It creates all these cyber bullies. Don't be a cyber bully. But here's the really cool thing about it. Is I've noticed when you try and communicate, a lot of times that anger, as soon as you see that person or you hear their voice, it kind of brings it down a couple notches. So try different styles of communication. But the biggest piece of advice I can give you is you can overcome anger. So some of you might need medication. Some of you might need to get out of a toxic relationship. Some of you might need to get rid of some of those angry people. And if you're one of those people who is constantly angry, I would encourage you right now to try and replace those thoughts with something positive. Anytime that you want to say something negative, say something positive. It is a simple practice that can really, really help. So here on Have a Dadbod podcast, we are okay with having a dad bod, but we're not okay with having a dad bod mind. So keep that mind sharp. I'd love to hear your comments, concerns, questions, any experiences that you have about anger. And once again, thanks for joining us here on Have a Dadbod podcast, episode 2.